Next, the gentlewoman from the great state of Indiana, Congresswoman Houchin, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the ranking member, and thank you, Chairman Powell, for coming to speak with us today. It's been a long day, so thank you for being here this entire time. One of the greatest strengths of our financial services industry is the diversity of our banking system. I know firsthand how important it is for us to maintain options and choice for Americans, whether it's somebody looking to open a savings account or take out a loan to start a small business. Increasingly, however, we have seen consolidation in the banking industry and increased difficulty for smaller financial institutions to survive. One of the reasons for this is an excessive regulatory burden that many of the smaller banks face. While this can come in the form of new proposals and adjustments to liquidity requirements or to things like Basel III endgame, it can also be due to outdated technological capabilities at the agencies and inefficiencies in and within the examination process. Chairman Powell, could you just talk about what steps the Fed is taking to upgrade technology and procurement procedures and update training practices to ensure that the banks that you regulate don't face unnecessary burdens?
So to your point, the number of banks in the country has been coming down for 40 years. And there's consolidation going on for a whole range of reasons. And we're not trying to foster that. We're not trying to push that. And we're aware that, high fixed costs from regulation may be one of the reasons for that. So we do try to keep that in mind, particularly for the smaller institutions. On your question around IT and specific things, I might take an opportunity to come back to you with somebody who's closer to the specific supervisory practices.
That would be
Fair
great.
Question.
That would be great. And just for reference, I was proud earlier this year to introduce a bill, the Fostering the Use of Technology to Uphold Regulatory Effectiveness in Supervision Act, or the Futures Act. It's an important bill that would require our federal bank regulators to conduct an assessment to ensure that the technology and training systems they are using will improve and reduce the burden on especially on our smaller financial institutions. At the same time, the bill will strengthen the safety and soundness of our financial system by keeping our regulators up to date on the latest fintech innovations. So I was glad to see that the Futures Act move through the markup earlier this year. I certainly hope to see it come to a floor vote soon. Chairman Powell, in your comments yesterday in the Senate, you said Basel III will need a, quote, meaningful revamp. Before we proceed toward finalization of that rule, I was glad to hear you say that. Considering 97% of public comments on Basel III were negative, with 86% of that negative feedback coming from outside the banking sector. Many of my colleagues here today have highlighted their own concerns with Basel III. Given the pressure that Americans are already facing with inflation and increased interest rates and housing market stalls, I would urge that you take a good long look at the cumulative effect of this rule in context with the broader economy, our small and mid-sized banks, not just the larger financial institutions. Will a meaningful revamp include consideration of the hardships that overregulations cause for smaller financial institutions like those that are essential to rural communities like mine in southern Indiana?
I think it will, yes.
And are you concerned about the consolidation that we are seeing in the banking sector? I know you said it's been going on for 40 years. Does consolidation in the banking sector concern you? And are you concerned that the broader effect of cumulative rules is potentially leading to a further consolidation in the banking sector?
Again, we don't want to be part of the reason for that consolidation. It seems to be happening, though, organically. We allowed interstate banking, for example. Also, I think for a long time, the learning was there weren't a lot of economies of scale in banking. I think with all the technology costs, that old learning is now not really true. And so I do think, in fact, I think a lot of the sort of smaller regionals do feel that they need to grow to be able to compete with the larger regionals. And also, the very largest banks are also present, as you well know, in many, many communities where they weren't 30 years ago. So I think people are seeing a need for scale from a business standpoint. And we don't want to push consolidation. I think we also don't want to stand in the way of it if that's what's necessary for banks to compete with the largest banks.
Thank you, Chairman Powell, again for your testimony. Our financial system is really the envy of the world. We need to make sure that small and growing institutions have the tools they need to innovate without any undue burden. I appreciate your emphasis on that in the meaningful revamp. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.